Okay, so now you are online.
Okay, thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank you. Okay, so it seems that we are live now, and I would like to open this session. Good afternoon if you are in London or in this time zone, or good morning or even good evening or late evening if you are in Australia, I would say. Welcome to this session of I4C conference. The title you can see here from the slide is Climate Justice in Urban Pedagogy and Practice towards an inclusive and context-based or context-sensitive, actually, green recovery for cities. My name is Giulio Verdini. I'm a reader in urban planning at the University of Westminster. I'm also affiliate of the Planners for Climate Action. And in fact, actually, this session is sponsored and supported by this network. So we are here to discuss with a clear aim, to discuss in a way issues of, I would say, innovation at the interface between academia, between universities and the practice, and how we can, in a way, tackle more effectively urban climate problems with the perspective of equity, of inclusion, of diversity, and so on. In the program, we claim that in a way, when marginalized voices are not fully taken into account in our climate urban strategies, but also at the same time when models are applied to other contexts without really a careful context-based understanding of challenges and opportunities, the knowledge we create, the climate knowledge we create, might not be entirely applicable to those contexts, and for this reason, it can be problematic, or might also increase actually inequalities. So in a way, that's the aim, is to really bridge the gap between theory and practice, and this would be particularly crucial in this moment where we are discussing the recovery from the pandemic, that hopefully will be green recovery. That's the key point of probably of COP26, that we are also looking forward to see the result, and green, but also fair and careful, considerate of the aspect I was mentioning before. So to do this, we line up a list of great speakers, and there are all here, and this is already something great. And I will introduce briefly the speakers and also the program of the session for today. So in the very first part, my colleague Sabina Cioboata from the University of Westminster will present very briefly some findings of a project that was funded by the university research communities on sustainable cities in our university. The project has a title of Decolonizing Urban Knowledge for Effective Climate Action. This project had some ramification that we will briefly mention. Particularly, there was a project where 12 universities, as a result of this project, were involved in producing videos on how communities work, how students worked with communities in various different problems around climate change. And this was presented at Youth for Climate, the pre-COP event held in Milan a couple of weeks ago. So we are really producing quite a lot of material in preparation of that. Later on, we'll have a series of what we call the global contributors from different parts of the world, so presenting their own experience with their own specific angle. Linda Shi from Cornell University, that sent, unfortunately, just a pre-recorded video, but at least she's here virtually with us. And Alphonse Chiesi, which is professor at the Institute of Human Settlement Studies at Ardi University in Tanzania. And then we have Rudina Toto, senior researcher and expert of territorial governance and environmental planning at CoPlan, Institute for Habitat Development in Tirana, Albania, also teaching at the local university, at Polis University there. We'll have the chance to open the floor for questions. If you are here with us on Zoom, you can participate. You can write on the box, or you can raise your hand. If you are following us in streaming, you can even actually click on the sort of join button that you find near your video. That would allow you to get in, as long as you have a Zoom account and you don't encounter technical problems, hopefully not. The second part will be instead about reflecting with some really excellent guests on this panel, but also on their own experience. On one end, Anna Hurliman, Assistant Dean of Research and Associate Professor in Urban Planning at Melbourne University in Australia, a context where reflection on issues of decolonization, inclusion and diversity are really taken seriously into consideration. And then Hassan Rodwan, which is a professor and director of the School of Architecture and Planning at Mohammed VI Polytechnic University in Morocco, and really pioneer in setting up a new school in a context like Morocco to respond more effectively to regional challenges in a way. And finally, is also we are really very glad to have here Stephen Bland from UN Habitat, and also one of the co-organizers of the conference. Thanks for being here with us. And we would really ask you to ask Stephen to reflect on how the message of this panel can be in a way linked to the conference and then to COP26 in Glasgow. If I have 1 minute more, I will just mention the question that we posed to, and this is mainly for the audience, to all our speakers. Of course, we won't probably respond to all of those. We might want actually to go beyond those questions, really, but we started by asking what measures can be adopted to decolonize urban climate knowledge, how we can translate the theory into practice with a focus on equity, inclusion, and diversity. How can we co-produce effectively context-based knowledge that matters to people and places? And finally, how can we innovate our urban practice to enable an inclusive and fair green recovery? And what's the role of universities in this process? So that's the framework. Thanks everyone to be here. And I would like now to give the word probably to Sabina to present the research, and then we move from there. Thanks. And I stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Giulio, for the introduction. I will try to share my screen. Is it working? Yes, perfect. So I have the chance today to present a piece of research that we have been carrying out at the University of Westminster, as Giulio mentioned, on city climate pedagogy and practice with a specific focus on decolonizing urban knowledge for effective climate action. As already briefly introduced by Giulio, the research was concerned with knowledge that addresses climate justice and resiliency. And in this sense, two broad considerations have primarily informed the project. On one hand, the need for universities to acknowledge the limits of knowledge production and to really incorporate more diverse perspectives and approaches in an effort to reimagine, as we framed it, more transformative education models. And on the other hand, considerations on the repercussions in practice, where there is a need to respond to models for city climate action that have been predominantly produced in Western contexts. And a way to respond to this imbalance is with the development and incorporation of more diverse paradigms and context-specific climate solutions. So in this sense, our main aim was to explore how architects and urban planners should be educated in order to effectively address global challenges such as climate change. And in order to address this, we again looked at two interrelated dimensions. On one hand, we aimed to explore innovative teaching and learning strategies for city climate resiliency. And on the other, we wanted to highlight and to explore context-specific and innovative solutions for climate change. Towards this goal, we conducted a series of in-depth interviews with academics and practitioners, some of whom are present with us in this panel, with expertise in city climate knowledge and who were working across different continents. And this resulted in a series of findings that I will briefly go over now, which again can also be explored in two complementary strands. The first is related to climate knowledge and urban programs across universities. So in this sense, we first looked at challenges and opportunities related to the integration of climate knowledge in urban programs. So how is climate knowledge actually embedded in urban programs? And we found that despite there being incipient efforts at the development of new climate programs, there is still a large degree of context and institutional variation in terms of curriculum innovation. So in this sense, approaches are quite fragmented, with one important underlying cause largely being related to the fact that there are still quite weak correlations between accreditation policies and climate knowledge in urban programs. So in this sense, let's say that accreditation policies could be an important impetus for curriculum innovation. We also considered the ways in which climate knowledge is contextualized within urban curricula, and we broadly found a couple of elements. Firstly, urban programs still have quite large knowledge gaps when it comes to addressing the legacies of the colonial past. For example, this is sometimes materialized in the fact that numerous curricula disregards certain countries' urban traditions prior to colonial times, just as one example. At the same time, there are more well-known challenges, perhaps that we are more familiar with, such as the availability of data, unbalanced power structures in academia, and a lack of diversity of staff profiles. And finally, another challenge that came out from our discussions was the difficulty to strike a balance between encouraging international students to consider perspectives different from their own, while at the same time preparing them for becoming practitioners with localized knowledge in their home countries. So this is something that universities really need to start reflecting on, the ways in which to address this somehow contradiction, let's say. However, at the same time, we also observed the broad degree of context-related curriculum adaptation and flexibility, particularly in places where, for example, environmental challenges or disaster risks, such as, for example, rising sea levels, earthquakes, etc., are exacerbated by climate change. So in these contexts, we were really told about a need to sometimes even go beyond the curriculum in order to address ongoing issues, pressing issues. And particularly scholars from the global South noted that it is quite difficult to detach teaching about climate change from consideration on urban issues such as informality, vulnerability, inequality, inequity, etc. At the same time, there have also been increased efforts to encourage relevant case study comparisons, to diversify reading and teaching materials, and very importantly, to incorporate alternative sources of knowledge, such as indigenous knowledge, for example, as well as to encourage students to listen and to learn from multiple stakeholders, such as, for example, importantly, communities. We also had a chance to look at inter and the transdisciplinarity. So by this, we mean working across disciplines and also across sectors. And we found quite a strong correlation between sustainability knowledge and science-related subjects, such as engineering, for example, as well as quite a strong design focus, which of course is very important and valuable, but it could have some disadvantages if it ends up undermining other essential emerging fields, such as policy, management, governance, etc., or even newer relevant fields such as computer science, for example. However, certain universities are finding ways around institutional barriers, such as, for example, setting up completely new sustainability programs that operate across disciplines and operate across departments. And very importantly, at the same time, urban programs seem to be turning towards practice-oriented teaching, which implies substantial efforts to engage and work more deeply with actors outside of academia, such as communities, or to offer students opportunities in industry, such as placements, for example. And by way of starting to draw a couple of conclusions, we had a chance to reflect on the role of academia in addressing climate justice and how this role could really become meaningful. And I will present the diagram clockwise. I will present the points clockwise. Firstly, this means truly supporting students to challenge the status quo and to become change agents. And this can be done by equipping them with critical thinking skills and with also with different value systems, such as, for example, a sense of responsibility, as well as equipping them with diverse knowledge and soft skills like policy, advocacy, etc. Secondly, it really means curriculum innovation and finding ways to challenge disciplinary boundaries, which is really the key to rethinking the nature of urban climate solutions entirely. At the same time, it also means learning from alternative sources of knowledge, such as directly from communities, and importantly, prioritizing research that particularly focuses on vulnerable communities, but through processes that encourage knowledge co-production. And in this sense, also related to the idea of knowledge co-production, it is also important that research produced in the Global South is prioritized and is more effectively disseminated and incorporated. At the same time, another key point is the importance of effectively transferring knowledge that is produced within academia into the private and public sector. So really, here key is academia's involvement in practice in a systematic way. And last but not least, universities need to play a greater role by leading by example and becoming themselves a hub for sustainability and innovation. And at the same time, we also consider the current state and future of planning and architecture practice for climate resilience and climate justice by looking at a series of context-sensitive climate solutions. And as previously mentioned, we, of course, came across research which is increasingly highlighting that internationally circulated sustainable urbanization models, but also methodologies, assessment frameworks, etc., which are tailored around the specificities of European or North American cities, do not respond to the needs of cities from the Global South, as also mentioned by Julia. And this has numerous implications, including, for example, the fact that it results in the legacies of colonial planning continuing to be propagated at policy and planning level, which can be attributed to multiple factors such as fragmented governance, predominant top-down approaches, and the marginalization of community know-how, a continued reliance on foreign consultancy, and a disregard for local knowledge and expertise. However, there are emerging spaces for innovation and paradigm shift and dialogue, which are opening up globally. And in this sense, we have also tried in our report to highlight a series of case studies that show a plurality of approaches and a plurality of context-specific solutions to climate resiliency. But unfortunately, due to time limitations, I'm unable to present these. So I would like to invite you to visit our blog on the University of Westminster webpage, where we continue to disseminate this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sabina. So I think, yeah, here in essence, there's a couple of points to strong points to bring to the discussion, this idea of reimagining, which is important, and we need, in a way, a new imagination for our programs. And I have to say that here we are also, at least where this project started, we are indebted to a previous project that we did on interdisciplinarity in urban studies that was mainly conducted within the European context because it was funded by EU Cost Action. And I will share the link later on in the box so that you can get to information. And there is also an open source book called Enabling the City, which really was the sort of starting point of this discussion. And then the other aspect of instead the localizing, which has to do with how we then, as university, let's say, we can engage with the real world in a way that we can occupy a space, a critical space that normally would not be, occupied or by the industry, by the practice, because it is more problematic in a way. I think here there's also possibility for university to be sort of more willing to embark in this agenda. Now, we leave this for later, for discussion later. I think now we can move to our contributors, as I said earlier, and I would now share the video from Linda Shai from the University of Cornell, and this will be a first contribution really regarding the aspect of decolonizing curriculum, and after how this can be applied into an exchange with the practice. So just give me a second to share. If Sabina, can you just stop sharing yours?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Shai, and I'm an assistant professor at Cornell's Department of City and Regional Planning. I'm very sorry I can't be there with you today, but at this very moment, I am teaching class. At Cornell, I teach two major classes. One is our Intro to Planning History and Practice, and the other classes relate to my area of research, which is on climate adaptation, equity and justice, and urban governance. Giulio asked me to speak to how can we decolonize planning curricula. This is a very difficult task. We have tried, especially in our core classes, to elevate the importance of helping students recognize the ways in which colonialism has shaped industrialization, the racist ways in which we segregate space, and how it percolates into every aspect of extraction, planning, monetization. But to decolonize is very difficult because every aspect of capitalism, of planning, of the state bureaucratic system, of taxation, of land titling is tied in one way or another to the colonial enterprise and to capitalism. So while it is possible to share awareness and elevate the importance of how these practices are embedded, it is much harder to decolonize our curricula. In particular, our planning colleagues do not all agree on how capitalism, colonialism have shaped the curricula, and therefore how we should go about decolonizing such an education. What I have tried to do in our core class, the core class that I teach, is to show our students how colonialism and the other historic moments have contributed to the kinds of inequality that we see on the ground today. You can see, for instance, in this exercise early in the semester, where I asked the students to take one of the three focus countries of this semester, which is South Africa, China, and the United States, and to consider how colonialism shaped one of those cities. And when the students are able to then compare and show how colonialism as it played out in Hong Kong is similar to, and in some ways different from, that experience in Cape Town or that experience in Charleston, South Carolina, they are able to better understand how these same systems play out on the ground in different ways. But perhaps more importantly than the similarities are also the differences, because if the structures of colonialism and racism and capitalism are always the same, then it's not worth being a planner, and we should all go home or do something more enjoyable and less stressful. But it's in the fact that they are actually different that students are able to see space for agency and space for change. One of the things that I'll talk about in terms of moving towards equity and in practice The challenge of that, of course, is teaching our students how to be engaged in practice when we ourselves sit within the institutions. And even though we can do studios and workshops, these are often not enough to actually show them the political nature of this work and how to learn to become politically savvy, to navigate and to pull on different levers and to work with people in such a way that despite all sorts of constraints, you're able to change and push through those kinds of changes. One project that we did was in Massachusetts, and it grouped together 3 different coastal municipalities. You see the city manager here with the bald head on the right, working with a team of our students. And this municipality is going to be 50% underwater under climate change. And they are under very dire circumstances because they have done everything that we say as climate adaptation people that they should do. And there's not enough left of what they should do. And so the question is, what should they be thinking about? And in this case, it was not a community co-productive exercise, but I think it's also possible to be engaged in a co-productive exercise at the municipal level. And the students helped conduct the analysis to say, ultimately, the decisions that drive a municipality are really related to budgeting and to fiscal balance of the budget. That is what elected officials really respond to. And so they thought about what are the different kinds of adaptation choices and what are the impacts to the budget, and use that fiscal lever as a way to get people to think about the kinds of difficult choices that they perhaps would otherwise be unwilling to confront if we were only talking in generalities of land use or equity or justice. And finally, in terms of the kinds of innovations that I think we need to be moving towards, we have such a, increasingly the popularity of the idea of resilience is making it so that the kinds of industrial machine or corporate consulting machines are moving to become real experts in this field. And there is oftentimes a replication of the existing drivers of inequality that have led us to this moment, except with a kind of climate adaptation filter that sits on top of that. If we are willing to think about radical change, that largely happens in the areas of design. We're willing to think about things like Boston becoming Venice and having houseboats like the Netherlands, but we're not willing to think about the underlying drivers that cause us to have the kinds of developmentalist cities that we do right now. So I think that the kinds of innovation that we need to be able to teach students is a willingness to reconsider the things that we teach in planning as the underlying basis, the parameters that shape planning and that therefore seem to be unchangeable. Property rights, tax systems, municipal boundaries of incorporation, the regulation of public versus private spheres, the scales of governance between local, municipal, regional, or state subnational authorities. These too should be under consideration as the kinds of things that we can change or at least debate in order to create a more just and equitable society. Thanks so much for your time, and I wish you all the best in the rest of this conference.
Okay, back here. I think, yeah, it's a bit unfortunate that Linda cannot be with us, to be fair, because she really brought quite an interesting point, and I think there's a couple of things about this. Of course, first difficulties in understand. I mean, in getting to a kind of common understanding of, because of different views of the world in reality when it's a matter of touching these points. But then the other aspect, very concrete, about then engaging with the municipalities and trying to find ways to rediscuss really critical aspect, paradigms of planning and policies, and trying to find this, what Linda said, the space for agency and the space for change, which might not be easy to find, but is in a way a possibility. So that's her contribution. And I would then suggest to move to the next, to Alphonse, now to travel from the US to Tanzania and trying to see a complete different perspective. And now is also my role to moderate. And so Alphonse, you have 10 minutes. With the video, it's easy. You have, that was 7 minutes, so in perfect time. And you have 10 minutes, Alphonse, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I would like to share my experience from Dar es Salaam, being that at the university, we are also teaching architects and urban planners. And of course, we managed to now trying to put this into practice on how you can translate from what the students are being taught and how they can now participate together in the city working for the people. I will just say that Dar es Salaam is a cultural, political, and economic center of Tanzania, and is one of the most vibrant cities in West Africa. It is also one of the fastest growing metropolis in the world, but put together, the population is of 5 municipalities is now approaching 6 million. And of course, it's growing at a very fast rate, about 1,000 people, inhabitants per day coming to the city. We are expecting that the population will rise to about 10 million by 2030, become a mega city. Of course, the rapid demographic and population growth poses the challenge of how to ensure that all citizens of Dar es Salaam live in a safe environment, enjoy a good quality of life, and are able to make a sustainable living. That is the major challenge for the city. The questions being addressed in my presentation will be that how can we co-produce effective context-based knowledge that matters to the people and places? And secondly, how can we translate the theory into practice with a focus on equity, inclusion, and diversity? And finally, how can we innovate urban practices to enable an inclusive and fair green recovery? That's the major problem in the last one, because a lot of open space are disappearing, being actually used for other economic activities in the urban area. I will just talk about the co-production of the effective context-based knowledge that matters for the people and places. And this is the Dar es Salaam thematic atlas, which was actually produced it was a joint project between ICLEI and Dar es Salaam, and I'm sure the actors were involved. But this was meant for biodiversity mainstreaming into nature for urban resilience. And one of the goals of the biodiversity conservation is the biodiversity conservation and the sustainable use of biological resources into economic sectors and development, models, policies, and programs, and therefore into all human behavior. There are, of course, in the thematic atlas, there are some critical reasons which have been identified for greening the city and for keeping urban and peri-urban ecosystem intact. It was a participatory nature, as I said, and in the preparation for the atlas. We had input from the students at the from Art University, and of course the lecturers, including myself, but also input from the public and private institutions and civil society organizations. We are very much engaged in the production of this thematic atlas. It was, of course, also portrayed in the first presentation, showing that this was a joint project and trying to portray the green spaces in the city. And of course, this is the Dar es Salaam city, as you can see. And we produced the thematic atlas. It can be downloaded from this reference, which is in this slide. And of course, the nature's benefit of Dar es Salaam, as you can see, is a sprawling city, high-rise buildings coming in, but of course, having also very close the seafront. But of course, also some having a lot of informal settlements growing around the city. This was, as I said, it was very well prepared, using working together with these different stakeholders from within and from outside the country. And as I said, this civil society organizations were engaged and discussing it, the results, using a lot of students going to the field to collect data, and of course feeding back in what you can say in the office, and coming out with the atlas. The city council was involved. This is a border, is an NGO, and then at the university itself. But also we have Una Rivers is one of our stakeholders also working together with us. Stockholm Resilience Center, Stockholm University, Swede Bio is a program at the University Resilience Center, and ICLEI through a project called Interact Bio. We are very much involved in this project, and Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research in Germany. Benefits of the thematic atlas. What are the benefits? We have several benefits. One, it shows where, how, and why the slum depends on nature. Two, it illustrates some of the most important connections between human beings and the slums ecosystems. And it emphasizes to protecting and enhancing urban green spaces in order to provide opportunities and helping to address many of the problems related to the slums growth. The atlas demonstrates that there is a need for action at different scales and across various sectors and policy areas. But of course, it depicts that maintaining Dar es Salaam's ecosystem is a cross-cutting task. It's not a one-man show, let's say the only city council and so forth. But also the atlas reflects a high potential for more broad-based initiatives for protecting and restoring Dar es Salaam's ecosystems. The atlas is used to allocate project funds to show cases of diversity in nature. This is part of the information which is provided in the atlas, but in the thematic atlas, and it is of course prepared for climate change. You can see also some efforts coming in, especially along the sea front, whereby a wall is being built. But of course, there are also in the informal settlements, regularization is taking place to make sure that climate change is really well come out to the resilient settlements. But of course, also green areas can reduce a flood risk and protect urban infrastructure. That is also a major threat of the thematic atlas. But now that was the thematic atlas. How could you use the atlas now and go to the neighborhoods and try to come out with some what called innovative projects? So we can say translating theory and practice into practice. The case of Sinza, Kwakibaden, Dar es Salaam. This is one of the after having the atlas, but now we have to look for how to implement some of the innovative issues which were mentioned in the atlas. And one is translating theory and practice with a focus on equity, inclusion, and diversity based on the thematic atlas. And secondly, innovating urban practices to enable an inclusive and fair green restoration. Dar es Salaam, a lot of green issues are appearing, especially both in the peri-urban and also within the inner city. But now, how can we even restore those small spaces which are left behind so that they become inclusive, but they can also become used? Objectives of the Sinza Kwakibaden project is restoring the neighborhood ecosystem. That was the major objective. And the aim of the project is to showcase the potentials of landscaping and greening public open spaces for economic generation and sustaining them into active green spaces. Creating conducive green spaces. Through greening, these open spaces become conducive for usage, hence elevating the quality of community life. Employing design charrette. Design charrette was adopted for engaging the community from the scratch in planning, designing, and implementation of the project for the community to own it. Embracing biodiversity, greening these open spaces brings life to flora and fauna and around the community. And we have some slides which we shall show how this is going to be being implemented. Engaging the community, the MTA leaders also, ward leaders, and the MTA leader is the lowest low government administrative unity in our country, in our cities. And they've been very much engaged from the beginning. And also ward leaders and the municipality for technical and legal matters in greening the open spaces to ensure security of the open spaces. This was the existing situation, which as you shall say is quite chaotic. is not well done, and you can see nobody is taking care of. The purpose of this, as I said, is to restore, to innovate, to restore, and to see how we can link nature and, of course, the economic issues and social benefits. And then we came out with innovative urban practice which we call Sinza Greening Project. And this was designed working together with the private sector. From Square One is a company from South Africa, working together with also a local counterpart, but also working together with the city council, from the municipal council. And we came out with a small design of the area, which is a part of the neighborhood, is an open space, which as I showed you, that is not really tendered for. And we intend to do landscaping and greening the open public space. And this is one of the demonstration projects. And this is exactly what we are going to do. And the space is quite enough to include this kind of things, benches, and of course, greenish. And these are the things which we are expecting, let's say, come February or March next year, things will look like this one. But of course, we should also bring life to flora and fauna around the community, means that we can also include things like pathways where people can come and stay and sit and talk and have a dialogue. But of course, as you can see at the middle of this open space, there's a statue which we are going to put there. And this statue is one of the famous, one of the major players, the football players, who is in the neighborhood. And we thought that we should honor him by having a statue called Kibadeni. And that's the why the project also Kibadeni Sinza. And we are going to also install some integrating nature with economic activities. And here is that at the moment, as you saw in the chaotic slides, is that people are already practicing having some stalls, and the stalls are not arranged. So we are going to have some trading stalls here, which are well arranged. And also, we are going to have play field for children here. Nursery children, young children come to play in this area. But of course, people also can have a play there in the green scenery there. But also, we are going to have what we call a compost system, which is one of the areas in one of the places, one of the spaces there. We shall have a compost system where compost manure will be produced. But also we'll introduce the public toilets. Public toilets in our city and in the neighborhoods is a major problem. People don't have public toilets, so we are going to introduce it at least here, but also a parking space and washing space for cars. People are washing cars along the streets and all this, and we thought we should also include that. And all these economic activities and public toilets they will be used actually to generate funds, which will be used now to maintain the area. And that is the innovation, innovative idea which we are bringing in. How we could use the spaces, improve the spaces, but also introduce economic activities, yeah, of course, community in nature, and use the funds, including to maintain the area based of the community themselves. Implementation and operational maintenance. We are saying that the entire leadership, which is the lowest leadership in the area, we has appointed a contractor which under the guidance of Square One, as I said, and Obongo Municipality, who actually overseen the project. It will be operated and maintained under the entire leadership, and bylaws are intended to be prepared by the local community, which will be used for keeping the neighborhood ecosystem intact. Expected outcomes. We are thinking that the capacity building through the curriculum development trainings and meetings, forums, and so forth are very important outcomes which are coming from this, the Atlas development, the training at Harvard University. And of course, here I have to say that the Atlas is already being used by students at Harvard University going to other towns. Like recently, they were in one of the towns in the north. It is called Tanga Municipality, Tanga City, and the students went there for a studio work, adopting the Atlas kind of, and bringing this into practice at the local community, working together with the city council of Tanga. But of course, we are also talking about the expected economic, social, and environmental benefits, which will accrue from the implementation of this project. And also, we are expecting that the planning policy instruments, including regulatory measures, development promotion measures, including the landscaping of the area and the infrastructure services provision in the area. Financial measures in terms of the people now getting people are no longer paying for the services. They are selling some things there, but they are not paying anything, and we're expecting that they'll be paying now. And the coordination of the measures, means of coordination is that connecting all the people will be involved in the development of this also. And I think, as I said, this is the demonstration project. There's a second demonstration project ongoing in another municipality, Ilala municipality, and we're expecting that if this worked out very well, emanating from the thematic atlas, then we can actually spread in the whole city, and this we can be one of the ways of restoring, especially the what you call the open spaces, the greenish scenery in the city. More information can be obtained from the atlas, as a thematic atlas which has been prepared, and we are acknowledging that we have used some of the information for this presentation from the thematic atlas of Dar es Salaam, and of course the interactive bio demonstration projects in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Thank you very much.
Thanks, wonderful, Alfonso. Thank you so much. It's great to see actually how, in a way, what we have said in theory can be then materialized in practice, and this is an example of a complex effort, I would say, at different levels, taking into account integrated solutions, but also mobilizing communities, having tools for the allocation of funding that can take already into account issues of vulnerabilities, let's say, and then acting by, of course, as I said earlier, mobilizing different levels, communities, the private sector, the institutions. Now we move to the last presentation for this part, so then we can open the floor to a Q&A. So it's the turn of Rudina Toto from Albania, and over to you, Rudina. Thanks.
Thank you, Giulio. I would like to share the screen first because I have a couple of pictures actually that I would like to show while presenting. Okay. It's visible, isn't it? Okay. So thank you again for actually inviting me to join the panel and also be able to bring some, let's say, news from the Balkans universe. So we're moving to another part of the world now. I'll start from where Giulio introduced me first, on the fact that I work for Copland Institute for Habitat Development, which is an affiliate partner of Polis University here in Tirana. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is because, as a matter of fact, within our institutional ecosystem, we deal with climate change from a combined perspective, where we bring together development projects, policy influencing, research and teaching, and learning all together. And we try to combine this. Polis is an academic institution, but Copland is actually a research institution and applied projects. So this is a model which actually allows us to engage students, staff, early career researchers all together in education and learning processes. So let's say in a process of co-creating knowledge and co-producing, sharing and exchanging. Obviously, this is our own philosophy, but on the other hand, it is continuously challenged by the overall institutional context in Albania, as well as by the evolving situation with the climate change in Albania and in the region. So I would like to bring here a few quick facts, which I think are known, but let me just quickly bring them. In the Balkans and in Albania, this is a picture actually of one of the cities, is the suburb of a major city in the north, which is a coastal area. Actually, the temperatures are expected to grow up to 4 degrees by the end of the century, and this will definitely be followed by extreme weather events and increased frequency of natural disasters. And currently in Albania, we have at least 2 major floods, like you see here as well, per year in the coastal area. And then we have several smaller events, but which happen within the urban areas. Besides that, we do have also other problems related to climate change. For instance, we have wildfires. This happen, recurrently, is an annual phenomenon. For instance, only this year we had over 3,000 hectares of forest area and shrubs that were affected by the wildfires. Now, I'm not saying that climate is the reason why we have the wildfires, but climate is the reason why they cannot then easily be managed, especially for this summer. And then what about our energy system? In Albania, we have hydropower system, which if you compare to the Western Balkan, which is fossil fuel, one would say is quite sustainable. But in reality, it's not really sustainable because, first of all, we are also importing energy, and that means that we are contributing to CO2 and methane emissions too, though indirectly. And the second, by actually investing and developing more and smaller hydropower plants, Albania is in fact contributing to the depletion of water resources, to the alteration of biodiversity in the areas where the hydropower plants are built, and also to water shortages for the rural communities. And I would like also to bring up here another worrisome phenomenon, which is the deforestation, which besides lowering the carbon sequestration capacity, is actually also contributing to land loss and because of erosion, actually. I would also like to mention that in Albania, the major emitters of greenhouse gases are not really industries, but transportation with 52%, and then manufacturing and construction, which follow afterwards. It's only 26% compared to transportation. So to summarize on these challenges and on this context part, actually our challenges rely quite a lot on one side, the fact that the systems are, let's say, underdeveloped, underperforming, and poorly maintained, and on the other side, the fact that the institutional capacities are insufficient to deal with the problem, but also the fact that knowledge that is needed to deal with these problems is either insufficient, or even if it's there sometimes, or not sometimes, but quite often, it's not used in policy making or policy decision making. And in this context, the role of the universities in relation to climate change research is also rather limited, even though in the overall area of research, universities are doing better. But when it comes to climate change, I would say that we have a lot to improve. If I go into even a more broader context, not just climate change, but now transitions, green transitions, I would say that in 2020, the European Commission actually adopted a comprehensive economic investment plan for the Western Balkan, part of which is also the green transition agenda for the Western Balkan, which is actually aligning the EU Green Deal goal to make Europe the first climate neutral continent in the world. But the point is that there is a barrier in the Balkan and in Albania actually to adopting and implementing this agenda. And the barrier is the fact that we lack territorial knowledge on transition costs and benefits. Because we know that when transition happens, a lot of economic sectors and stakeholders, the society at whole, will be affected, but we do not know how. From an urban planning education perspective, creating knowledge pathways to achieve or stimulate just green transition means actually getting to know better the territorial specificities, of the area of the country actually, including challenges, and also trying to understand what to expect from the disasters, from the climate change, and also how to adapt. Now, getting this local knowledge means actually decolonizing climate knowledge, for Albania in this case. And in order to mainstream this knowledge in the university curricula, we at Polis have a number of tips that we make use of. First of all, we involve students in the Horizon projects that we implement. Actually, there are a myriad of Horizon projects going on in Europe. And I believe that these projects are about research and society. So I believe that there is a lot of space to engage students there, not just as target groups, but really as contributors to the knowledge creation or knowledge making process. And we try to do that with our own projects. On the other hand, we try to bring a lot of students in the field. So besides getting the theoretical knowledge in the class, they really have to go and experience or experiment in the field so that they grasp what does it really mean in terms of environment and climate change, or what are they going to face in the very near future. And we do also invite guest lecturers, and I'm not talking here just about university professors, but guest lecturers from different stakeholder groups, for instance, from local governments, businesses, or civil societies, so that students can actually also acquire their perspectives, the perspectives of these stakeholders in relation to climate change effects and climate change adaptation and mitigation. This will really help students to translate the theoretical knowledge they get in class, to translate it then into the real life and then adapt it to the real life conditions. And in this way, you believe that education in climate change can embrace even more the applied dimension. Well, to conclude, I would simply bring two examples from our work. We have a PhD studies here at Polis, which are provided jointly with Ferrara University. It's a double degree actually. And every year we organize a PhD workshop which we conceptualize it as a co-creation lab where early career and senior researchers get together, work and generate knowledge through research, prototyping for various typologies of urban settlements and areas, and then produce innovative models of territorial governance, which then they transfer to the public institutions that are interested to work with. This year, for instance, the workshop will focus on the disaster risk assessment and planning proposals for one part of the coastal area in the north, actually the area that I showed you in the pictures. And the risk analysis that we will conduct, it will be a participatory risk analysis with the citizens, students will participate in it clearly. And the idea is really to be able to come up with planning decisions that try to connect changes in the, or interventions in the territory with effects of climate change events and also the local vulnerability. And then the workshop ends with a publication, an edited book, but also with a proposal, as I said earlier, provided to the public institutions, which in fact are involved in the co-design process of the methodology of the workshop every year. And these are different stakeholders, by the way, depending on the case that we choose. While the other example I would like to bring is the one that you also see on the screen. I just took two screenshots actually from the platform, greenlands.albania. This is in fact an initiative of COPLAN funded by the European Union. It's going on since 3 years now. We are actually measuring air quality, greenery, and noise in 4 major cities in Albania. It's like an alternative monitoring of air quality for the cities. Here, this is a map of Tirana, for instance, for one of the, I think it's for CO2, if I'm not wrong, yes. The idea is that this is an information that is provided real time to the citizens, and it's not just a matter of measuring technically air quality, because that is done by the institutions as well, but it's rather to provide as many points as possible of measurements and then to raise awareness among citizens in relation to air quality and then greenhouse gases as well. Students participate in the process, initially in the preparation of the methodology, in designing the methodology, and then later on in data collection and database establishment. So, this has been actually one of, I would say, the projects that the students have liked really quite a lot, because they get the theoretical knowledge in class, but often students are suspicious towards what we tell them in terms of climate change. They do not even sometimes believe that it's really going to happen to them or in their lifetime. But when they go out in the field and they experience themselves what's happening and what are the sources of air pollution, etc., like in this case, that makes them really more, much more aware of what to expect and how to change their behavior in regard to this, I mean, worldwide phenomena that we have to deal with. And I would have even more examples, but I know the time limitations, so I'll stop here. Thank you, Julia.
Thanks, Rudina. That was great.
And I stop sharing.
thank you very much for this presentation, which it's extremely important for us to reflect on situations where, as you were mentioning at the beginning, there are barriers to implement policies, and there's actually a work which can be done. Of course, there is also a question, yeah, how much can be done effectively by universities and so on to share this awareness, to engage communities, to break these barriers, economic stakeholders and communities and so on. But we already are at the end of this first part, so it would be nice to get some questions from our guests here, from people like that they want just to type a question on the box, so to start some first reaction, and then to leave later the floor to our speakers to reflect on that. So is there any question that you might want to ask at this stage, or just some comments so far? Just feel free. I have also posted into the chat some information about the books and some information about previous research that can be seen, observed. I will post later some other information. I think a quick question, probably, if there's no other one, asking that I would like to ask to both of you, Alphonse and Rudina, is about how much you see, how effective you see the action, not just your action, but the action of those who are working at the interface between university and practice to really promote an awareness on certain kind of aspect. Is it possible to scale up these experiences, or what kind of support do you need? Do you envision for really trying to make a difference? Because of course we are also discussing these problems from another point of view, that is the urgency that climate change requires in terms of action. So we can't really wait until this awareness will grow. We can't really wait until we will be equipped as a university scholars to deal with communities. So of course everyone needs to do his own bits, but in any case, what's your view on making this more effective in a way?
Yeah, I could just start by saying that I think the major problem we are doing, especially at universities here, is that action-oriented kind of teaching is not so much there, linking the industry with the investees, and that's a major thing I will say. But now, if you want to scale up this kind of practices, especially for our case, we are saying probably we could actually, some of the students here, for example, at the university, we are teaching architects, town planners, surveyors, and highly what we call project kind of training. That it is, they have to work in the field, and it is project kind of training. And we are saying that what we could do is like the way we teach the town planners, they go to the villages and they do planning, and they present to the what we call the local authorities, and some of these projects or village planning projects or neighborhood plans are automatically implemented. So for this kind of activities, we are thinking that we could have what we call a collaborative kind of activities at the university, linking, for example, urban and regional planning, urban planners, the architects, the environmental engineers, and also even the quantity surveyors working together as a team, and now going to the informal settlements, going to the areas like the neighborhoods, trying to restore some of these open spaces based on the model as I presented. And I think this is a way of scaling up. And I think the students, the money which is given to the students, especially in every semester, and also the industrial training at the end of every annual year, this money could be used actually by the students and the lecturers to start scaling up some of those models. And that's what I would say is just a way of doing it. But secondly, if I'm aware that the local authorities which we have been working with, the municipality of Kinondoni, of Ubungo, they are very much impressed about this kind of practice. Downloading some of the initiatives or projects from the Atlas and putting it down into practice. And I think probably working together with these NGOs, working together with the municipality, and also working together with the urban university students and other students, of course. And I think this is a way of scaling up. But of course, emphasizing this allocation of funds for this, because often, especially in the south, not in the north. In the north, I know I was in Canada sometime and also in Germany and all this. There's already a lot of money which is allocated for greening up and all this. But here, I think not much money is allocated for, especially at the local level, for greening. So probably the investors could actually make sure that money is allocated by the local authorities to restore some of these open spaces. Those are initially what I will recommend in order to have a scaling up a kind of, and I think it's possible.
Thanks, Alphonse.
Yes, if I could also add up to what Alphonse just said, in fact, well, the short answer is that yes, it is possible to scale up, but obviously there are challenges to it depending on where you are. I mean, what country, what territory, what specificities, and what institutions, obviously, and even what societal problems. So that's different everywhere. And that's why we're talking about decolonization, by the way. For instance, at our university, environmental issues were always inherent and core to the planning curricula. Climate change per se, very specifically, not until some time ago, but very quickly got in, because as soon as you get aware that this is really an important issue, because it's an important issue for our own quality of life, then you bring it up. And I think with students, it works quite well. Where we are challenged is the public institutions, particularly local governments, because at the end, we have to cooperate with them, we work with them. The planning phases usually go very well, I would say, with them. For instance, the DRR I mentioned a little bit earlier. In Albania, we do not have local DRRs. It is just the last year that we started to prepare them. We have now one, and hopefully we'll have more. But for this DRR plan, we had a great cooperation with the municipality. It was approved, and now implementation is stalling, because implementing a DRR plan is not just about, is not like giving a building permission. You have to invest, first of all, in certain types of infrastructures, which may be quite costly and require resources. And second, it means for the local government to start working with communities to implement those innovative models that the DRR contains within itself, but now you need to spend time and energy to work with the people to implement them. So this is like the challenge that we have. And this kind of challenge is based on other systemic problems of the society that I wouldn't really like to start talking about now, because it's not really the place. However, what I would say is that in certain contexts like ours, it's better always to start with those problems which are really like the hot issues. For instance, I mentioned before transportation, which is our largest emitters. Even though we do have problems with the agricultural sector or the urban sector in general and so on, maybe by starting with this hot issue, which is a major emitter, then we'll just lower emissions quite a lot, and then we can start thinking of the other topics or problems or issues that we have within our cities. So, as I said, the whole point is how to bring the knowledge quickly to the local governments or to the governments, because for the long term, by working with a young generation, that is of course possible.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I think I'm conscious about time, so there's a comment in the chat box and about the emphasis on this aspect on decolonization in particular, that might be really the way to go in facing some of these aspects, and then in trying to address what we've been discussing here. But I think it would be nice now to hear some comments about the panel as a whole, but also bringing the experience from both Anna Hurliman and then Hassan Radwan, so that we can try to keep the time. So Anna, if you want to start, is over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Julio. I think I'd like to start by thanking all the speakers for their really interesting presentations. And I think there's quite a few similar themes occurring across the presentations and also from my experience at the University of Melbourne in Australia. And I think one of the themes that was across a number of the presentations was about the need to act quickly, yet be reflective, and also some of the challenges to acting with urgency on this issue, including institutional barriers to change that are experienced across universities. And I know they're very much something that we're grappling with in Australia. And also this theme that sometimes practice and professional institutions can help facilitate that process of change and bring that urgency, bring speed to that. But in thinking about that, I wanted to just reflect on, I actually last week attended the ACSP conference in the US from here in Australia. And I listened to a speaker called Teo Wicklund, and he was speaking from an Indigenous perspective and saying that there's a real bit of aggression in our thinking of acting so urgently on climate change. And from an Indigenous perspective, we should, be very, cautious about that and think about the impacts on Indigenous people when acting in such a, this urgent action sort of way. So that presentation last week really made me think about my position and thinking about the need to act with urgency and reflecting on, how we actually might need to think about how we balance that with really thoughtful consideration of Indigenous people's perspectives and the impacts that might have on them and the further impacts on them from our actions. So I think also, Radina, in Australia, I've done some analysis of urban planning curriculum documents. So looking at what a sample of universities across Australia are offering in terms of their curriculum. And like you, we found there are big gaps in terms of climate change. And we looked not only at explicit climate change knowledge and capacities, but we also looked at other capacities that are really important for climate change. And that included the consideration of diversity, inclusion, participation. And we found those less explicit skills that planners need are quite well covered in curriculum. And it was the explicit climate change ones that weren't. So in a way, as an academic, that made me feel a little bit less stressed, I guess, that actually we're doing some things good, and that's sort of underlying planning skills that can be applied to climate change. But there are some gaps in terms of the explicit climate change issues to address. And I think another theme that came across was this idea of translating knowledge into skills and practice. And that was another thing that we looked at in our research through some surveys of planners. They often had a high response rate to having knowledge about climate change, but when it actually came to applying that knowledge and having the skills and experience, the responses really dropped out. So I think a number of people, Alphonse as well, showing the ways in which you get students into, real life situations and embedding their educational experience, I think will go a long way to help build their skills in actual implementation. So yeah, I think they're my key. I know our time is very limited, but I think I just wanted to pull out some key themes that I thought came across many of the presentations that also resonated with my experience in Australia.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks a lot for bringing this your experience to the discussion. I would ask Hassan also to give his points, to provide his points for the discussion, and then so we can then again reopen up.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me? Okay, good. Thank you so much for the presentations. They are really very inspiring case studies from different countries, and I feel that this is the richness of such kind of showcasing and exchanging different experiences. And this is why I find that this term of decolonizing, contextualizing, I think there are two key terms, honestly, because now with globalism, we may seem that we solve problems in standardized way. It's just like we're making the car that you may find it in Sydney, the same, it could be in London. And this is wrong, because when we talk about context, we're not talking about context just, sitting with complex systems. We're talking about also a genealogy. This is a problem. We look at context like tangible assets from the hard side, and we think that we solve everything by the hard side. A piece of landscape is beautiful. We may recover it, but maybe that piece of recovered landscape is in the middle of something that is devastated. Hence, the scale is so important. You cannot maneuver at the micro level, and the macro level is not working. So therefore, the multi-scale dimension and which resolutions we are actually trying to set with by communicating between these different scales to prompt generative, innovative, resilient, sustainable ecosystem.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Sorry, the Siri just got, I don't know, by its own. So therefore, if you may allow me, thank you, Sabina and Giulio, for the introduction, because it's really helped us understand what you're looking for. And then the well-chosen case studies of course, of Alphonse, Dar Salam, Linda, and then Rodina. As you've seen, the problems are different, the context is different, and the angle of attack is different. And the other layer of complexity is which discipline. That means, are you strategizing as a politician, as an urban planner, as an academic? So this is also another problem. But I think we are all aware about one little global issue, that is climate change. But don't forget, dear ones, that we have other issues now to address, and this is why I like the topic of university knowledge and practice, because we cannot be departmentalized and solve the problems. I'm talking from my own modest experience. The chemistry people, they have something to say about climate change. The people of physics, they have something on materials. The people of political science, they are talking about climate change, and all they are talking about climate change. But where is the problem? I think the problem is not about different fragmented knowledge in a university that is seeking an action, which is a new thing, we should all confess. We are now talking about research action, project-oriented education. We're talking about learning by doing, hands-on. These are all new slogans because, yes, we were very enshrined in fortresses of universities, and we've never been taking the synergy, the energy, and say, we are actors. This is why I like these planners for climate change. So let me actually be more crispy. There are 4 areas that we need to focus on. The first one is, what is the topic? What is actually the angle of attack? Is it culture? Is it the social challenge? Is it the financial challenge? Because all these projects, they need some money. Therefore, we need to rethink how economic system is working in order to generate a new kind of projects that they would deal with climate change in a very holistic way. I insist, holistic way, not fragmented way. I can be me, an architect planner, propose a project, but I would not have any whatever adherence from politician stuff, and they talk from my own case study. I liked actually the last presentation and the question of resources. I think it's not just the climate change, but how we would substitute the current oil mentality that is actually devouring nature and consuming energy in a very other consuming system. And they lived in the Gulf area for 5 years when I was in between Dubai and Sharjah. Honestly, as a human being, not only as an architect, when I was getting to a skyscraper of 100 levels and is devouring energy, not only consuming, devouring energy. So therefore, there is something to, like for instance, now this question of solar energy. And let me give you an example. Thanks God in Morocco, we don't have oil. And just because we don't have oil and we have the challenge of energy, so therefore we started thinking that within 10 years, 15 years, the whole nation consumption of energy should be 50 to 60% passive energy. And by the way, you've heard about the largest solar station, not for one district, not for one city. So here you have not the top in a negative way, top down, bottom up. These are all slogans. I mean, now you see we're moving on now. The bottom is very important and the top is very important. And therefore, what can we envisage as strategic solutions to create the right ecosystem for micro projects, different scales projects, for that to be a whole mindset? And this is why the word culture is very important. Now, the question of the university, you know more than me that universities, they were made for education. That was the mistake. Now, how we would convert universities to be living labs for real projects. I'll give you an example. I'm not talking from void. In the School of Architecture, Planning and Design, with the whole corporate that created the university, we have now 3 real living labs projects. We went to a rural community and we're doing simulation of resilience and sustainability in a rural community with the community itself, because we know that the government strategic planning, as you have all plannings there in your countries, they don't work. Let us say it. We should confess. I mean, all these strategies, urban planning, master planning, and please, whenever we show a project as planners, we need to be very careful about what's showing. When you show me a plan, I'm not impressed because the plan is just a little layer, 2D. Can we encompass the genius of a culture, the importance of the players and the users, the environmental ecological layer, the economic financial complexity in 3 layers, stupid layers, and then they say, I've done a master plan. That's the mistake. So therefore, what we're looking for, a real integrated planning where we are looking for a metabolism, linking materiality and immateriality and creating an ecosystem where the users themselves, they are part of sustaining life and creating this, keeping this biodiversity, etc. When I talk about biodiversity as a fragment, it doesn't make any sense. It just biodiversity. But when you link the man-made and nature-made and how you combine them in order to create an integrated ecosystem that would sustain life, this needs a whole work internationally, and hence the role of universities is crucial. So what about which kind of curriculum will actually foster this integrated approach and this holistic pedagogy? Let's say it. We architects, my goodness, we are still me, the monsieur architect, I can do all. and it's so hard to change. The city planner is a dogma against the architect. No, the architects have done it. We, the city planners, we do it. Like city planners, what they do? Nice schemata that will actually solve all, which is impossible. I think since Cerda in Barcelona, or all the genesis of urban planning with the Athens Charter, that was a catastrophe. It's not me saying it's CERT from US who wrote to Corbusier and the whole myth of this cartography that was create life. I think we are reaching now the end of urban planning. And this is why in my school, I don't even say urban or rural. I'm against this dichotomy. Let's use the United Nations word human establishment. Inclusive, resilient, sustainable, smart, not in the gadget sense, but smart in terms of human intelligence, collective intelligence, in order to create that kind of vehicle where people, they interact, they create their well-being, but without generating waste, pollution, and all this impact on nature. So therefore, what kind of innovative curricula? And let me give you an example, because we don't have in Africa, since actually we are a campus, what you see behind me, a campus that was designed for Africa. You know what, by what we started? We didn't start by curricula, okay, because we are so obsessed by curriculum. We started by problems to solve in Africa. And by defining what kind of challenges regarding climate change, sustainability, resilience, sustaining cultural forces, then we came to design programs that would solve problems rather than fancy curriculum by one discipline. I give you an example. When I mentioned the title of a master, the higher education, they were blown up. I said, Hassan, what are you saying? I said, okay, I have an executive master on social resilience and territorial innovation. It's not a master of urban and city planning. It doesn't mean anything for me. I studied in the US. I know very well the system. I studied in London. I know very well the system. I lived in the Gulf. So please stop using masters of urban planning, masters of climate change. Even master of climate change means nothing. Where is the problem? And then you are training professionals to deal with the new challenges. I will not be long. I have one last thing to say.
We need Stephen as well, Hassan.
What kind of connections the university can do, which kind of new partnerships with real problems on the ground, okay, and then create packages of living labs to test and learn and bring real solutions in order to set up a holistic thing, but based on micro and macro. And the role of universities is crucial. I can talk more and more. I'm so sorry that I've been long. Thank you so much. I thank you all. I was so inspired by your case study. I think yes, thank you. Okay,
thank you
I know you're polite with me, so I shut up.
Just two points on Anna and the curriculum, because I feel there are similarities with Westminster, and the gaps are addressed also by the fact that students are the drivers of change, and they want actually different things, and that's something that we need to take into consideration. And then on the other hand, this idea of setting up something for problems, which is the living lab that Hassan was mentioning. I think these are two models which we should look at. Giving voice to students, giving voices to those affected, and then being very operational. But now allow me to ask Stephen to bring us. Sorry for keeping you waiting. Over to you.
Sorry, Stephen. It's me to be sorry.
Not at all, Hassan. It was very interesting to listen. And thank you, everyone, for this really wonderful session. And we're basically out of time. So I will skip most of what I had wanted to reflect on. It's including, I wanted to make a sort of provocation about the challenge of decoloniality and perhaps how we're not responding to it, my dog, responding to it quite as in the way that perhaps the challenge requires. But first of all, I want to say that I feel a bit of an imposter speaking in this session because I'm in fact a human geographer and not an urban planner. And yet I found in my career, I've entirely surrounded by planners and working with them. So I hope in the spirit of interdisciplinarity, we'll continue to listen to a human geographer on the panel. I wanted to share with you really just a few key things that are coming up in the conference on this topic of justice and equity that I hope will be useful to then reflect on in the conversations we have around urban planning and curricula. So one of the key things that's coming out is the idea of putting justice and equity at the heart of climate action and reframing climate action around that. This is a strong theme coming out, and it's been also raised in this panel. David Dodman in the plenary on informality made this point that if you frame the issue differently, then you get very different outcomes. And he said that an entry point for climate adaptation should be sanitation. That's the entry point if you're taking a justice lens to the issue. And yet climate action is set up in such a way that often we come with very different technology-driven energy efficiency in buildings and other lenses that we take and apply to the city. Roy Rathin at the Overseas Development Institute, who's written very interesting work on decolonizing climate action, says food systems is the just entry point for climate action. And so I think this is a very interesting thing that's coming up in the conference and demands a reflection from urban planners about what their entry points are into helping the students to tackle climate change. The other thing that's coming up strongly, and when I say coming up strongly, I mean this is a subjective interpretation. I haven't been in every session, of course, but one thing is moving towards more root cause analysis of the issues that we're dealing with and less superficial ones. This is definitely moving away from projects. You can't, from Climate Kick, the CEO, Kirsten Dumpton, said, you can't change systems through projects. It's not possible. We need transversal programmatic work and funding that will do it. And the other thing is questioning some of our basic assumptions. And Hassan, you mentioned that one of those, which is our very concept of the city and the fact that as planners, we should be conceptualizing urban and rural areas together as interconnected places of material flows and not the spatial unit of the city. And again, in the climate change practitioner world, which is my perspective I'm coming from, not from the academic side so much, is we obsess and fetishize the spatial unit of the urban area. And again, a kind of systems-based approach that looks at root causes, which I think takes us some way towards decoloniality and some, it's part for me of the process of deconstructing some of the things that we've created over decades. This is another, I think, relevant point for urban planners. And then the last one that I want to mention, and then Julia, I'll hand back to you, is on, I've seen a number of presentations and contributions on moving beyond participation and more towards an analysis of power dynamics. And this, I think, is something also that planners are well versed in dealing with and offering their experiences and solutions. The unequal power relations are kind of coded in the language you use. Of course, researchers have their subjects, which many researchers are moving away from using this language, but that's the power dynamic is coded, the word subject in its history. And the same in international development institutions like UN Habitat, where we talk about beneficiaries of projects. I mean, you could not get a more explicit language coding of power than that. So I think this stuff is coming up in our conference, and I'm very excited to see it as a practitioner, as someone who works in UN Habitat, who I think is doing some fantastic work at bringing forward justice issues into the climate change discussion through work in the Adaptation Fund in informal settlements. So I'm a big champion of that work. At the same time, I think decoloniality challenges a lot of the work that we're all doing. And I see it coming up in the conference in these three ways that I've just mentioned. And I think all of them are relevant to the discussion that you've been having and to planners. Just one final word, on a practical thing, is to tell you that this conference is based on something called the Global Research and Action Agenda on Cities and Climate Change Science. That's the thematic framing of the conference that was devised 3 years ago in Edmonton. And there is a writing team at the conference which is working to incorporate all of your contributions, including from this session, into an updated version of that GRAA. And this time around, climate justice, we added it as a cross-cutting theme. It wasn't there in 2018. And so I would welcome you all to actually go to the discussion boards and add some of the things you've added here so other people can hear them. And also there is a form that Giulio can provide to you that was sent to him where you can actually submit in written form some of your contributions, because I think that the new GRA that emerges from this conference will include this justice and equity issue much more strongly. That's my feeling from the conference discussions. And I think that's very promising, and I would welcome your continued inputs into that process. And thank you for all the rich sharing and the practical examples of the work you're doing, and certainly UN Habitat with Planners for Climate Action is very interested to continue with that. So thank you very much for the chance to say some closing things at the end. Thanks.
Many thanks, Stephen. Thank you really to everyone. And we'll try to capture all the main points of this conversation and the keywords and the concept, and actually in a sort of substantial way, not just a hashtag for our social media. And when we will prepare this form, as we are very close as a group of people that will work together quite well, I would like to share with you before we just send, so that we can get feedback on that. So it can be really a document that is, as a panel, we then propose for the conference. It has to be done in the next few days. I'm not going to recap anything apart from mentioning what has been said by Stephen. A few points, a few words about the interdisciplinarity, the interconnection of problems, the need of redefining paradigms, and the power dynamics, all very important points alongside our, of course, core that is about climate justice, about inclusion, equity, and so on. So hopefully we will have the chance to get together in other occasion based on the result of this session. This is the ambition, so it's not going to be the end but the starting point. Thanks a lot, everyone, everywhere, and see you soon.
Thank you, Giulio. I hope to see you all in Marrakesh soon.
we wish to. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks
Bye. Also, Olivia. Sorry, no time
Ciao,
for.
Giulio.
Ciao a tutti. Bye bye.
It was great. Thank you.
When he stopped, I start. Leave.